Hello, everybody. My name is Mark O'Sullivan. This is Terry Rappley, and we'd like to thank all of you guys for coming here tonight, lifting Steve up. And, it's a good crowd, but this is probably only a fraction of the people he touched. And not only touched, but shepherded. We were talking about this earlier. He was a true shepherd. He would attract people in here. And he would just put his arm around you, and he would shepherd you through the Gospels.
Mark and I had a moment earlier when we were talking, and you can never measure the influence that Steve had in our lives. There's just no way that you could capture it, no matter what we say here this evening to honor him. The influence that he had and the impact that he had in our lives. And I speak from mine personally, going from my early 20s, we're talking a almost 30-year time span of an influence and a model of love and being a Christian and the love of Christ. So Mark and I, we're going to go over the technicals, his technical accomplishments, and his family and his loves. But they're just a baby picture of who he was as a man of God. And he was a beautiful man. And that's actually what we're honoring today. So
we're going to read his obituary here. And while we're reading this, afterwards, we're going to open it up. And I'm sure there's a lot of stories out there. And I know that's what he would want. He would want us to share these stories. We all know he was an introvert, right? He did not like to see. He did not like to be at the center of attention. But he would leave the 99 to go to the one, and I was one of the one. He made me feel really special, and I'm going to, just like Heather said, I can say that I was his favorite because he made me. You were his favorite?
Sorry.
But the thing about it is, he made you feel like you were his favorite. And he did that for everybody. So I have to reference Heather for that one. So tell your mom. Stephen A. Igarta. Steve Igarta Jr., 76, was born in Samar, Philippines on October 22nd, 1947, the eldest son of Esteban Igarta and Pasita Marino. Steve relocated frequently as a child of the U.S. military service member. Growing up, he lived in Japan, Washington State, on the island of Guam, and in Lawton, Oklahoma. After high school, he moved to Houston, where he earned a bachelor's degree in biblical studies at Gulf Coast Bible College, and met the love of his life, Maxine May Maddox, whom he would marry the following year. Steve went on to earn a master's degree from Anderson University School of Theology. A few years later, he was called many places while working in ministry, relocating his family to Oklahoma, Indiana, and Guam before settling in Red Bluff, California, where he pastored for an additional 35 years. He retired in 2016 and moved to Portland, Oregon to be near his grandchildren.
Steve was devoted to his faith in God and the churches he led lovingly, pastoring countless families over his career. He was passionate about knowing God and making him known. He was committed to serving those in need through various programs like feeding the homeless in the local community. Steve frequently traveled the globe, partnering on missions with organizations that included the India Gospel League, For His Children Orphanage in Quito, Ecuador, and project partners in China. He sponsored dozens of mission trips with various groups throughout the years. Steve served on several board of directors and numerous terms as president of the Red Bluff Ministerial Association. Steve is survived by his wife of 56 years, Maxine Igarta, his children Scott, Melissa Kaiser Scott, Seth, Julie, Denver, Christine, Stacy, Kara, and his brothers Jimmy, Lorraine, Romeo, Brenda, Robert, Linda, Jesse, Carol, and his mother, Pasita Marina. He was predeceased by his two sisters, Teresa Igarta and Jane, with Rick.
How's that for a family, huh? Golly. Steve's love and devotion to his wife and kids are marked by a beautiful and ever-growing family that I just learned about. Ever-growing family that he adored. He inspired all of his children to nurture their relationship with their Heavenly Father and to dream big. Steve was a talented athlete and loved sports, especially baseball, tennis, and golf. His passion for playing baseball grew from the early days of sharing the field with other Army brats and his brothers to playing softball with his own kids on the church team well into his 60s. He was a devoted fan of his children and grandchildren, always in attendance. I remember seeing him at sports games or school events. In the fall of 2023, he welcomed his first great-grandchild. Besides his wife, children, and siblings, he leaves behind 9 grandchildren: Colin, Emily, Caitlin, Timmer, Jared, Taylor, Zane, Jaden, Reese, Zach, Sienna, Silas, one of the great-granddaughters, Charlotte, and a great-grandson on the way. So, pretty amazing man, would you say?
Yeah, quite the legacy.
Quite the legacy, and I'm sure there's a lot of stories out there, and I think at some point we're going to, I'll just kind of stay up here, and if there is somebody out there that would like to share anything, how Steve touched your life, just me personally, I remember coming in here pretty busted up emotionally, going through a divorce, and Steve was the guy that put his arm around me, and he was the guy that helped me through that, and it was it's almost like he rebirthed me. I think it's the only way that, and we all know it's God, obviously, but he just led me through that, and I'm sure I was one of his favorites.
We discussed that. For me, I first started attending when it was over on Rio Street. And although I've had a really interesting walk in my relationship with Jesus, she was that picture of a Christian man, of a Christian leader, of a Christian human being. He was athletic. He loved his family. He loved God. He loved church. And at the same token, he acknowledged his humanity. And he shared that. And it gave me a lot of relief when I would listen to his sermons, as far as that it's okay to be a human and that Christ accepts our humanity. And Steve modeled that for me. And again, I know this is a repeat, that you don't know the impact that someone had on your life. You can't measure it. Nothing we'll say here today will measure that. I'm going to start out with a story. Steve actually did the service for my husband, and he did our wedding ceremony. And we'd met with Steve here, and Steve had asked if we wanted to involve our children in the ceremony. And my husband, he had 4 daughters, and I had 3 daughters. And when he asked us that, simultaneously, both Ben and I are like, no, we do not. It was a really delicate situation. So we did get married out at our home in Derryville at the time. Record heat, 103 degrees that day in May. And what Steve do? He calls all our daughters up there anyway. We specifically said no. He specifically did yes. Now, here's the thing about that, and I've often thought about that moment, is it was pretty dicey with that prayer. I can only imagine what it would have been had he not prayed over us. And I do feel that God told him to do that, and he went ahead and did it without our permission. And I'm grateful to him that he did that. So that's my Steve story.
So I'm sure there are some more out there that would like to share. Terry's going to go ahead and just kind of walk the mic around. Don't be shy. They had to talk me into coming up here, so. I know one thing for Linda and I, Steve married Linda and I don't know if you all know, but I have 2 girls, and Linda's got 4 girls. So there was a lot of estrogen in our home, and he walked me through that too. And I'm eternally grateful for that. And he told me the importance of not only being a father to my children, but also being a good example to Linda's kids as well. There we
Thank
go.
you. Can you see you over there?
My name is Heidi Ackley, for anyone who might not know who I am. Two roads diverge in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Those were the first words I heard Pastor Steve speak in a sermon in 1981, I think. I'm pretty sure some of you were there that day. How many of you were there that day? You know, he took those words from Robert Frost, but that's okay. They were borrowed, but they were great. Little did I know that day the path that Steve and I and our family would walk together with Steve and Maxine and the Igarta kids, the places we would go, the people and the experiences that we would share along the journey. There were so many things that I learned from him. There was a lot of laughter, a lot of tears, a lot of sadnesses, a lot of joys. There are too many stories to tell I couldn't possibly ever share. I'm not sure how to do this on my phone. I couldn't even remember them. But even now, there's snapshots, moments that come to mind, and I'm grateful. In reference to the poem, you know, God orders our steps. He designs a path for us to walk. If I, or all of you, I'm guessing, if we had known the paths that Steve was going to take us on, we might not have gone. We might have said, I can't. He asked us to do what was not doable, kind of like what I'm doing right now. But he believed in us more than we could believe in ourselves, and I'm glad, as I'm guessing you are, to have made the journey with him. I'm glad that he would depend on us to do the things that seemed undoable. For example, can you make a birthday cake in the middle of the jungle to make sure that somebody on that trip had a birthday cake? That might have been one of you. Or when he said, can you help me fix the washing machine in La Tacunga? Because he had to do his laundry by himself. He couldn't wash his laundry with the rest of us. Or if he might disappear in a sea of Chinese faces and leave Maxine and Steve and me trying to find our way. We couldn't in Beijing. Or the time that he called and said he was already back in Red Bluff when some of us were either stranded in Atlanta, Georgia, or San Francisco, but he got a first-class ticket home. I think Robert picked him up. But what I remember about Steve and what I want to honor him and Maxine as well. Grace, forgiveness, winning and losing sequence in Ecuador. Always looking for the heart of God. Always wanting to know the heart of God. And knowing that we saw the heart of God in a man, not a perfect man, but a perfect pastor for me and my family. He hated to lose when there was a game to win. He hated to lose when there was a soul to win. He was determined not to lose because he liked to win. He liked to win for himself. But what he liked to do the most was make sure that everybody else won. There's no prayer request that was too big nor too small. He was willing to pray the prayer, to walk the walk, to go hand in hand in the journey. It's a funny story, and some of you that were in Church of God in 1980s, there was a lady there one time a little lady, who had a prayer request. It was way too personal to share, but she was determined to have it prayed about. So she came to the front, and she whispered her need into Pastor Steve's ear. And if you can imagine that brown face turning red. But I'm pretty sure he prayed for her because she reported sometime later that her prayer had been answered. She was really happy. And I'm pretty sure Steve was really happy too that she didn't share the prayer out loud. But if you spent any time with Steve in the 80s, the 90s, and the 2000s when he and Maxine left Red Bluff, you know how often you heard him talk about God delighting in daisies, that he made them one at a time. And that's what he did with people. Steve embraced people one at a time. He gave his time, his energy, his love, and his commitment. loving others, causing us to truly see others and help others see and know the heart of God, whether it was a path to Brazil, to Ecuador, to Africa, to India, to China, or one time to the first Christian church on an Easter Sunday to give away our offering that day because our church didn't need it as bad as theirs did. Steve was about winning at games, at life, not just for himself, sometimes for himself, but so about winning and helping others to be on that right road, that road less traveled, to embrace the journey. The lessons that I learned from Steve and Maxine and all the Igartas was, as a family, as a friend, as a pastor, was that love, that we should give love, that we should be loved, that we should give grace and receive grace, that we should forgive and accept forgiveness. And that's what he did. That's the journey that we've been blessed to walk with him. That's what I've learned, and I'm grateful.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. You know, it made me think about, we probably all have a favorite sermon that Steve did that stuck in our mind, that one that we reach back to once in a while. And for mine, he used to quote Dr. Seuss. And I imagine he read you guys Dr. Seuss. I'm guessing. But it was something like, this is truer than true. Nobody is youer than you. And he talked about that. And he made a whole sermon around that, how being authentic to yourself was so important. Being authentic with God was so important. Don't make me call on people. We can hear you.
I guess I lied. One thing I noticed is I was a 10-foot tall redneck, and you just made of steel. So I thought. And boy, was I broken. And one day I come in here, and I can't say, it wasn't even here. We were at the park. I don't know where we were. We were annoying people because our singing annoyed them or something. I don't know. But I came to the Vineyard when we were by the river. That was before we went to the parks and wherever they didn't kick us out. But it wasn't an accident because I was invited, and I see you guys. A lot of you are still here that were there then. Jumping around, acting weird. And I go, what the heck? But it's a weird I like. And I will tell everybody, I will be weird. I will be weird for Jesus. And if you don't see it, I will pray for you. That you become weird and call on Jesus. And we can all be weird. Because this man was This man was so anointed by God. I could just see it and feel it. And this 10-foot man just came down to my size. I'm not 10 foot. I'm humble. I'm not a redneck anymore. I am still a redneck. That's where I failed. I promised myself before 2 years, I'm going to make him a redneck. I came in here with my hats. I came in here with my cowboy boots. He is not a redneck. But here's the thing. He was so anointed and he knew exactly what to preach. Because we leave the church, my wife would reach over and grab me by the ear. And I reach over and grab her by the hair. And the following week, Steve is preaching about that. I would look at my wife and I say, you ratted me out. How did he know what to talk about? Steve is one of his kind. We all loved him very, very much. And I cannot believe this because the last time I saw him, he looked younger than me. Way younger than me. But I do want to say one thing. I am so jealous of him because I know where he's at. And I'm not afraid to go there. We love Steve. You're all going to agree. Let's all be weird. He told us how to be weird for Jesus. And if someone gets upset about it, we pray for them. That they become weird for Jesus like we are is the best thing we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Amen. You know, we were talking earlier. Oh, I'm sorry. We got somebody.
You can talk if you want, Mark.
Well, we were talking earlier how Steve was the first pastor that I chose, and I think it was the same for you, Terry. The first pastor I chose as an adult. You know, I've been in and out of church as a kid with my dad, and I was lucky enough to go through Calvary in Southern California. We were in the tent, and that's where I first got the taste of it. But then I got away from it for a long time, and Steve was the first one I actively chose, and I'm so grateful that he was the foundation. He created a foundation for me.
My name's Lisa Sandberg, and I have to just tag on something Chaga was telling you about making Steve a redneck, because one Sunday we all decided that we would wear a red neckerchief around our neck. And so he came in and a whole bunch of us had a red neckerchief around our neck to make him a redneck, and I think we gave him cowboy boots or something. I just thought of that, Chago. Anyways, I'm one of those people that was there with Heidi on that first sermon with the road less traveled. So that makes Pastor Steve my pastor for over 35 years. And through that time, I just wanted to touch on all the ways he's been a part of my family. And some of you will remember times he's been a part of your family. When he moved here, he and Maxine, the twins and Stacy were in my Sunday school class. And that's how long ago that they came. And Steve, what's it called? My kids were presented to the Lord with Pastor Steve. What do you call that? I can't. Thanks, you guys. I got my brain's going away. Anyways, it's pretty sad. Anyways, he did that. Not only that, Steve saw me through my divorce, and he saw Art through his divorce, and he saw us through our marriage, and he saw us through our almost divorce. And he also was the first person who they let in the room at the hospital that they put me in when our son died. And I put my arms around him, and I was so grateful to see someone who cared about me and my son and my family. And I just said, Steve, Corey went to be with Jesus. And I was so grateful that Pastor Steve was there for us during that difficult time. And he also did other things. He did my mom and dad's 50th wedding vows. In fact, he did a whole bunch of our wedding vows over on the coast several years ago. And he did my sister Kim's wedding vows. Was it your wedding vows, Kim? Yeah, it was. Good. Sorry, it's a brain. And he did my mom's funeral. And he always messed my mom's name up, and I can't remember what he called her all the time, but it got to be a joke. Anyways, there's probably tons more things that Pastor Steve did for us and our family. But Art and I love him dearly, and we love his family dearly. And he's irreplaceable. And it was very hard to hear about him going to be with Jesus, but I kind of figured he played golf with Robert that day. And he probably checked out Corey and a bunch of our other friends who are with Jesus now. And anyways, Steve Igarta was a great person, and he has a great family, and we love them to pieces.
Thank you. I think there was somebody right.
Thanks, Terry.
Hi, everyone. I'm Paula Villa, and I was just sitting here listening to some of your stories, and my story with the Vineyard and Pastor Steve and Maxine, I love her dearly, um, was a little different. I moved to this area 37 years ago, um, looking for a new way of life and a new way of looking at life. And I remember that this church was, I went to the first one in Rio years before that just for some help. And it was there. And then later down the road, I got into recovery. And this was the first church I came to because I had a friend that said, I you need more joy in your life. And I said, where do I get my joy? Because I already had 5 years clean, and it was starting to kind of feel like it was going away. And someone said, you need to go to church. So I decided to come here, and I loved it. I loved it. It was so different from what I was used to. And Pastor Steve is not a talker, and he was very quiet all the time. And I just like wanted to reach out to him reach out to me, but we kind of both were just. But what I did notice is that God spoke through him, and he spoke like he spoke directly to me, giving me guidance to find Jesus and to find a new life that I came so far away to find. And I just loved it. I loved the way God used him as, as the speaker, I think, for me. He just spoke right through him. Things I was going through came up in church. Like, how does he know that? And I started realizing that. And then there was one time they were giving help to children that they had their parents in jail or prison, and they were giving out gifts. And I remember my brother over there showing up at my house with some gifts for my granddaughter, because her mom had gone to prison, and I took her in, and I raised her. She was dedicated here. And those were the things that started to make sense to me, that Jesus was here, and he was always here. And then I got to know Maxine, and we went on like best friends. We talked because we like to talk. Me, we talked all the time. I look forward to seeing her more than Pastor Steve, because I got more out of her than him. But his services were beautiful, and they just touched my heart. And I was sad when he left, but I had already left the church, and I just kept thinking, this is just too good to be true. I've got to try other churches. And God, he allowed that for me, because I came from a different belief. And so I went to other churches, and I'm proud to say, and thank you, Pastor Steve, that I made it back home. I am home now, and I'm here, and I've been attending, and Pastor Luke is great, and his wife Dawn are wonderful people. So he knew that he passed that baton to some awesome people. And number one, I thank God, I thank my Jesus, and I thank Pastor Steve.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. God definitely spoke through him, without a doubt. She's on her way.
I'm Marilyn Westbrook, and I just want to say how much the Igarta families meant to us as my kids were growing up. We had wonderful experiences together. He took us to the Philippines as a family. We were able to minister there in a church. They made lumpia, and fried rice. They taught me how to make fried rice. And so, Paula, what you said about Pastor Steve, I was reminding Maxine the other day, they would come over for dinner, and I would just drill Pastor Steve. just asking him all of these theological questions. And he talked a mile a minute. He loved sharing about the Lord and about the things of the Lord. And Maxine asked me, she said, there's times when we just get together that we just like to relax and enjoy. And that was the first experience that I'd ever had, realizing that pastors don't need to be on call 24/7. And so we just enjoyed them as a family. They were a huge blessing. My Steve and her Steve are now with Jesus. And I told her the other day, I said, they're on a mission trip, and one of these days we get to join them. And I'm just so excited about that opportunity and for all the people that Steve and my Steve are getting to see up there with our Jesus. And it's a delight, and I love the Igarta family.
Thank you. Who couldn't love the Igarta family?
Well, I'm going to try to do this. About a year ago, I started transferring VHS tapes onto DVDs. And the first day I got home, it was a long process. I looked to my husband and I said, oh my gosh, there are so many videos of the Igarta family. It was crazy. And it reminded me of just how much of an influence, this was months ago, how much of an influence Steve had on our family. I told Larry, I said, I don't have a lot of memories that don't involve Steve. He married us. Well, he was a big part of Larry's life because Scott and Larry were best friends in high school, and then he married us. He dedicated both of our sons. He prophesied over our youngest son, words that to this day bring me so much peace and joy. As we grew in the Lord and as our kids grew up, we had no idea when we named our oldest son Stephen Andrew, and he was named after Steve and Scott. We had no idea that God was going to call our oldest son to ministry. And so 2 years ago, when our son moved from Tucson to Hillsboro, Oregon, Steve and Maxine heard about it. And Maxine privately messaged me on Facebook and said she wanted to know when he was going to be preaching because they wanted to hear him preach. And so Stephen had no idea that Steve and Maxine were going to come. We surprised him. And this was during COVID when people were still masking, and Steve and Maxine show up and they got pictures of it. And he sat there front and center in the middle watching our Stephen share the gospel. And afterwards, Steve walked up to him and he was so proud of him and had such encouraging words after a very difficult season. And that was the last time we saw him. And it's such a beautiful memory because Steve was always about giving, always about encouraging, and wanting others to be empowered. And there's so many memories, so many stories, but I'm just so thankful. I'm so thankful about how Steve taught us about worship. It was the first time in my life that I saw a man in the front row celebrating Jesus. And I'm just so grateful. I'm so grateful for all that he taught us in the Lord, but also just sharing our lives, having so many memories, so many, it's funny, the things that you take that you don't realize, until later, like we always wanted our kids being a part of worship. We always wanted our kids to be a part of community. Well, that was all because that was what Steve taught us. And how many other people have, it's like a ripple effect. You know, he taught people and then they taught people and they taught people. And so, yeah, I'm just really thankful and grateful for his influence on our life, and now getting to watch that like a ripple in a pond spread out.
Thank you.
I have something a little unique. I was the first one to meet Steve. I drove to San Francisco to pick him up off of the airplane.
Well, golly, you got to tell us who you are first.
My name is Joanne Dufour. You may know here.
Yep.
I know a lot of people here.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was the blessing of my life, the years that I worked for him. He called me his secretary. And several years, way back in the 70s, 80s. And I had the privilege of working with him and for him. And I moved away, and when I would come back to town, he made it possible. He just found time to go to lunch together and to talk about what was going on and stuff. He was my friend, a very good friend. And I tried very much to come up to him or not. He and Maxine would make Chinese, the rolls.
Lumpia.
Yeah, they would make the rolls after service sometimes on Sunday night. And it was really great. And for the life I've been serving the Lord, he was one of the best speakers I ever heard. He was. And we used to kid him. He had a whole room of books. And he even had to get rid of some of his books sometimes because they just didn't have room for all of them. Mm-hmm. But he just was a person that would always be a good friend of mine. And I had the privilege. He came to my house, just a few months ago. He and Maxine to visit. And I will miss them. I really will. And I thank God that he was in my life.
Thank you. You know, I hear stories of Steve driving 7 hours one way to see one of his grandkids' friends get baptized and turn around and come right back. That's how much the kids meant to Steve.
God, that's loud. Okay. I'm Linda Dodd, and I've known, look at Scott's laughing already. I've got stories galore. We could stay here all evening, but I'm going to keep it really short and kind of piggyback on what Joanne said. My family was very, very young when they first, actually, I don't even know if I had the first one yet. We had 3 children. He dedicated all 3 of them. Oh, yeah, he dedicated all 3. So we didn't even have children when they first came to Red Bluff. And Scott was my head babysitter through the years. And we just loved all the kids. I had Melissa at my house every week for, her junior and senior year. I would do girls' Bible study after school, and they would walk from the high school. I lived close by, and the kids would all be taking naps upstairs, and Melissa would make everyone be quiet, and we'd just slip in the door. And once we got in the back of the house, we could have Bible study. So Melissa's just been, just a godsend in my life, and Scott, and of course the twins and Stacy, all of them. It was cute because when Scott would come to babysit, he would ask if he could bring some of the brothers. And I would say, well, Scott, I'm only paying one of you. And it was always crazy when they all came. But we were glad to get away. So anyway, what I wanted to say about Steve, yeah, we just hoped for the best and we left Scott in charge. But anyhow, we just love the Igartas. Everybody's talking about the lumpia at their house after church on Sunday nights. And it was like, oh my gosh, we can go get free food, this amazing homemade food at their house. And we would all pile into their house, and tons of us, just to hang out with the Igartas. So anyway, what I wanted to say was I've been going to First Church of God since I was in the 3rd grade. So a lot of years. And we've had pastors come and go. And I can tell you without a doubt, Steve was such a standout. Not just for my family, but for the entire community and the congregation, everyone. I mean, there was just something special about him. I remember he hadn't been in town long at all. And my husband was a grocery clerk at Rayleigh's, and he would go through Gary's line, and he would say things, and Gary just like, how does he know? How does he remember? I mean, his mind, he knew everybody's name. He had just come to the church, and he comes through maybe it was your name tag. Because he said, I just thought of that. He said, Gary, how you doing? Yeah, it probably was. But Gary came home just blown away. He goes, he remembered my name. But as we all know, he was just brilliant. I mean, there was just this brilliance about him, just anointed, so incredibly intelligent, and, not real sociable, but that was okay because he made up for it in those weekly sermons. I mean, you were so drawn to church because you just wanted to hear what Steve had to say. And he guided my family and our children in some of the most impressionable ages of their life. And it's just such a legacy. I mean, he's just right up there. Top few men that have preached from the pulpit at First Church of God. And he just will never, ever be forgotten.
Thank you. I think what I heard there was Steve really knew how to listen. He was such a great listener. And being an introvert, that probably helped. But real quick, let me see a show of hands of anybody that's had a child, a parent, or themselves been baptized in Steve's pool by Steve. So I want everybody to look around. That's unbelievable. So, thank you.
Hello, my name is Dan Ackley. I have so many thoughts run through my head, and they're not real focused, so I apologize. I'll do my best. First off, to the Igarta family, as I said last week, thank you guys for sharing your dad. All week I've been thinking, all right, Steve, what do we do? What next? And how can you possibly honor someone like Steve and the impact that he's had? And what God's been putting on my mind all week is to assume the role, right? He was here, he preached, he lived a great life, and he did so much for so many of us. But for us to assume the role, to step up and start loving and pastoring people. I don't know any pastor. I don't know everything Steve said and everything he did, everything Luke says and he does, they're asking us to step up and assume the role. I don't know any pastor that just wants us to sit idly by and wait to keep being pastored. Like, assume the role. And so that's been on my mind. A lot of people talked about Steve as an introvert. I'm blessed to know that I, at least selfishly, I think I got the best of Steve so many hours and weeks and years in this office, spending time together. He believed so much in so many of us and believed in me, things that I couldn't even imagine. I remember coming home from a wedding, and my parents were like, hey, Steve's going to ask you to youth pastor. And I'm like, me? I don't know anything about anything. And he just saw things in us that we didn't see in ourselves, and continued to foster that and encourage that. The phrase that keeps going through my head too, that Steve would say is all the time, was, well done, good and faithful servant. Scott, when you and I talked, that's exactly what ran through my head. That's exactly what Steve, well done, good and faithful servant. I think also Steve, another phrase that resonates with me is form follows function. He said that forever. Form follows function. And what form do we want to take? And how do we function to get to that point? I can think about my whole life. I think I was, a year and a half old when Steve and Maxine and the family moved here. And the trajectory of my life, as I spoke with my folks, the trajectory of my life has been completely shaped and fostered in such a way that Steve and Maxine poured into me, that Scott and Heather poured into me. And so I don't know how else to honor someone like Steve, to honor him in our lives, other than to step up and assume the role of what he did, to always be available, to love each other, to see people, to pray for each other. He, like many of you, he dedicated my kids. He did my wedding. He was an introvert. My wife's an introvert. For them to walk in a room together and just make eye contact and be completely at peace, to know that they're both thinking the same thing, I appreciate that. She appreciated that so much. The time on the mission field in Ecuador, I remember going on that my first trip. I think it was year 2 or 3 to Ecuador, and sitting in that living room in the group house, and Steve. I'm just thinking, it's racing through my head. I think I'm supposed to come back. I think I was just there for 2 weeks with the group. I think I'm supposed to go back. And I was like, I don't want to tell anybody. I don't want to say that out loud. And it just kind of came, and Steve empowered it and was like, yep, that, and it just, and the rest was history, on the mission field, spending time in China with them, teaching us how to worship, right? Like you said, literally front and center every week, hands up, with very focused, intentional abandon to worship and to love Jesus, and to do that, to show us how to enter into the Holy of Holies and to love Jesus and to worship. So again, I have so many thoughts running through my head, but I'm so grateful for Steve, as so many of us are. And I hope I can live a life and raise my family in such a way that would be honoring to him. I'm so grateful for the Igarta family. Scott, thank you again. Thank you all for sharing him. Thank you for being the conduit, Scott, as my youth pastor, for doing what you guys did, you and Heather, so many years. So, I'm going to stop, but I'm going to miss him.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, pastors seem to, they're good at that. Assume the role. Step up and assume the role. I think that's one of the consistent things that I've seen with Pastor Steve and Pastor Luke, is they both say the same thing. Step up and assume the role. We're not meant to be, Christians aren't meant to be consumers. So, we got one more.
Yep. Thank you.
You made it. You made it. You get front stage right here.
Hey, you guys. Kind of go off of what Dan said, trajectory of life. I'm going to try to do this, keep it together. 20 years ago, my wife and I walked through those doors. I think we were sitting over in this section here, and it was about the second or third time. And I don't know why Pastor Steve wanted us to have us stand and for the church to pray for us. But it has changed the trajectory of my life and my wife's life and our kids and the family we have here. We are so blessed by your dad. I just thank you guys so much.
So you left a little bit out there. I mean, I think you guys went and planted a church up in Alturas as a result of Steve and Pastor Luke encouraging you guys. So anyway, I think at this point we're probably winding down. Nope, we're not winding down.
I had to get it right before. Hey, guys. I'm going to assume the role for my family right now and say something about my Uncle Steve. Growing up, I was kind of the black sheep of my family. And Uncle Steve and Aunt Maxine took me in for 2 summers. So one wasn't enough, but I got to come out and spend time with the family. And it was really good to be able to, really build a relationship with my uncle. I would see them at different family functions, but I didn't get to see him for a whole summer. And yeah, he didn't talk a lot, but he definitely commanded the room. One thing I really respected was the way his children looked at him. When I would be in their home, I'd say your parents are initially, I would say, your first mentors in life growing up. But, being able to have an uncle who was a pastor who took me into their home, and they had a bunch of kids already. And I was, definitely one that, struggled with authority growing up, really challenged that boundaries. I challenged my parents a lot. But for one reason or another, I would never challenge him. He just would give me a look, and I just knew better, right? And then I also knew how his kids looked at him, so I was like, okay, they've been here longer than I have. They know what's up, so I'm not going to test that. And, I'd come out here, he'd put me to work, right? I didn't think it was just going to be, swimming in the pool, playing tennis, shooting hoops. I had to paint the back shack. I had to mow the lawn, give me some responsibilities that I had to do during the summer. And, it was good, but they always made me feel part of the family. And I was always, because obviously my dad's his youngest son, or his youngest brother. Sorry, I don't think you're a son, but his younger brother. And so obviously him being the older brother to my dad, there was some respect there. And I just always appreciated him taking me in, because I don't think any of my other uncles wanted me there. I kind of burned, those bridges when I was younger a little bit maybe, but he took me in and, really kind of helped guide me and direct me. And I just really appreciate the time that I got to spend with him. One quick story, they have the pool and they have the tennis court at the back. And so obviously it was a lot of playtime, a lot of fun. And so when I come out here, I'd get a really good tan and hang out and try to enjoy myself after my chores were done. And one time they called us in for dinner. You guys might have heard this story before. And so I run in and I'm ready for dinner and they're all around the table. And I go right in from the pool to the dinner table, right? Just in my swimsuit and my towel. And my Uncle Steve looked at me and was basically kind of like, what's wrong with this picture? And I'm thinking, I don't know, we're about to eat. Go put a shirt on, right? So obviously you don't come to the dinner table without a shirt on. And I didn't get that memo in the beginning. But I just remember right there. I just knew right off the bat. I was like, okay, go get a shirt on, come back, then I can eat. But I'm just, really thankful for those memories and the impact that he did in my life. And, just want to make sure I shared that. And he'll be missed, but he's definitely in a better place. And I love you, Uncle Steve. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess just another example of he made you feel like you were the one. He left the 99 and he made you feel like you were the one. And that's the way he made me feel. So if there's no more, then I'll go ahead and wrap this up.